What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Blue River Bow Hunting Podcast. Hope everybody had a good New Year's and Christmas and holidays and got to spend time with the family and eat 50 pounds of food every day like I did. I want to shout some sponsors out before we get started with this week's episode. Local 18, Heat and Frost Insulators out of Indianapolis. If you have a career interest in the blue collar field, look up insulators.org. B&B Custom Calls out of West Virginia. Michael Hawk makes some great turkey calls. Spring's right around the corner. Go check them out. But I cannot wait to get into this episode with Tom James. What's going on, buddy?
Well, glad to be here, Brett. We are a couple days past Christmas here, and man, I was so proud of myself. I lost about 20 pounds here in the fall and was working hard on our farm and feeling good about myself. That, gosh darn it, in the last couple of weeks, this has been stupid. My wife and daughters, they cook too well, and they got sweets and stuff and pies and cookies around every corner. So yeah, it's that time of year. We're all having fun. And matter of fact, today we took a family a little bit of an afternoon break from work, and we all went to Pinheads and bowled together and had some wings and pizza and just, grandkids were there. It was a good time, man. So it's a really fun time of year. Kind of a little bit of a slow down mode for us, but we're already thinking about what next year looks like and what's going to be happening here in just a few short weeks with everything, with work and land and our management stuff that we do. And I'm excited. So we'll get into more of that.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, for somebody that doesn't know you, introduce yourself a little bit.
Well, thank you, man. I'm 59, almost 60 years old. I'm East Central Indiana. I live in Hancock County. I currently am the state managing broker and sales manager for Sullivan Auctioneers. We are a land-based company. We're specializing mostly in tillable properties, but also recreational and rural ground. Very well known for having the online live auction platform completely dialed. If you've ever want to watch a live auction being called by a skilled auctioneer, but also being able to bid on it live online, go to sullivanauctioneers.com, and there's multiple auctions a day. It's really fun. Even if you just want to see what buying land on an online platform looks like, it's kind of fun. I've been in the land business since 2014. Before that, I was a Central Indiana landscape architect, and I owned a design, installation, and maintenance landscape contracting company here in Indiana. But I can get too far off in the weeds. Just a quick sort of background about myself is I've always been a passionate outdoorsman. I've had my hands in the outdoor industry for quite some time. I developed a food plot implement called the Ferminator back in 2002, 2003, and owned that and ran that business for about 10 years. And I sold it to the Renews Corporation down in Milner, Georgia, about 10 years ago. And they've taken the product and made it an absolute home run. I'm super proud about that. Always been involved in the QDMA. I still serve as the local chapter president, avid food plot guy. I've been doing stuff since, man, when you kind of merge love for the outdoors and habitat and land together with a landscape architecture background with a little bit of an eye for design, I've been doing habitat design and consultation stuff for a long, long time too. I still do a half a dozen or a dozen a year. People will call me and want to talk land. And the next thing you know, they're inviting me to their farm and ask me what it would cost for a day to come over and shoot the bull and, toss around some ideas and put something on paper for them. Probably one of the things I'm most proud about is my long-term relationship with the guys at the Management Advantage online series. Now, it was on the Outdoor Channel 20 years ago, but now you can go to the managementadvantage.com. And on that platform, you can really literally search anything land management related, whether it be food plots, warm season grasses, timber management, predator trapping. Man, I can go down a long, long list. But if you have any interest whatsoever in managing property for wildlife, specifically probably more precisely deer and turkey, but also, upland game and things like that and ducks, there's a little bit of something for everybody in there. But we cover it all. And I've been a part of that team for a long, long time. I'm not a paid contributor to that. That's just something enjoy sharing knowledge and sharing experiences with people, and we get to put it on a really well-produced show. But the fun part is that it tells a good story. The episodes are always very well put together with a great storyline behind them. And if anybody haven't seen it, or if you've seen it before, I think you would agree that there's no egos on that program with anybody on board. It's just some simple country guys, some down to earth guys that love land, love wildlife, and love hunting, and love to share things that have worked for us. I have no ulterior motive. I don't get paid. I'm not selling products on there or anything. I just do what I do on my farm. And my son-in-law, we film stuff because we know somebody might understand, they may be able to pull something out of this that could work for them on their personal property. Trust me, as a 60-year-old guy, if it's been a possible thing to try, I've tried it one way or the other. And there's a lot of things that I've learned over the years that could save you guys, some failures, and that's one of the things I think that when you have some tried and true trial and error, realistic result-based, I guess you would say, results that you see work for you, man, share them. Let's talk about it. Let's have fun sharing the ideas and showing what we did and why and how it worked. So that's probably the thing I'm most proud about, and how it relates to this conversation today is that whole opportunity with the Management Advantage guys.
How did it all come about? How did that conversation start for you to join them?
That's a great question, Brett. It actually sort of dovetailed together. The very first year that I took the Furminator food plot implements out on the road to take them to the trade shows, I had a really sort of a soft relationship with Biologic. I became an Indiana dealer for their seeds, and I thought that would help sort of complement the implements when we went to shows. If I had some seed to sell, especially with a well-recognized brand, that it would get people's attention and bring them into the booth, because it was a brand new piece of equipment at the time. Nobody had ever heard of it before. So we had a relationship with, again, those guys were just letting me sell their seed. It wasn't anything beyond that, no sponsorship money or anything like that. But at the time, the Management Advantage was also doing some things with Biologic, but more on a serious level as a sponsor. Biologic was sponsoring the Management Advantage on the Outdoor Channel on their show. And Chuck Sykes and I met with Bobby Cole one day in an aisle there at a show. They both approached me at the booth. And to this day, I still joke with Chuck because he has this resting mean face, when he's looking at you. And I'm like, man, this guy looks like he wants to tear my head off. And we became really good friends after that. But in all joking aside, Chuck was probably the first guy that took the risk of spending airtime showing land management and habitat tips, not hunting. I mean, yeah, there was a little bit of hunting involved, but he had such a passion for teaching and showing things how to manipulate land for the betterment of wildlife. But he had so many people telling him this is a failing model. Nobody wants to see you plant dirt, plant seeds. They don't want to see you burn pine trees or plant warm season grasses. They want to see you pulling the trigger on a deer. And there was some truth to that for a while, but obviously he was at the cutting edge of that when it really started to ramp up, and it exploded not long after. But Chuck was also pretty brilliant, and he saw the writing on the wall with things moving out of outdoor television and going to online and digital. And it was hard to convince maybe some sponsors that that's where the attention was going to go. But by golly, it followed, and everybody's on that now, as you well know. Everybody's
Absolutely.
there. And television is, hate to say it, it's sort of it's a dying avenue of consumption for outdoor content. I mean, people still do it and it's still there, but I don't know how much longer it's going to limp along, because you can watch anything you want to at the tip of your fingers at any time of the day on your device or on your computer. And search something and watch an episode wherever you are at any given time of the day,
Absolutely. I've talked about that many times on this show, and I'll ask you the same question, since you were a consumer of that content as far as watching hunts and stuff like that. When and how do you consume your outdoor content? Like where do you go to watch a hunt or anything that outdoor related? Is it YouTube, or do you still go back to like the old DVDs like Real Tree Bucks and stuff like that?
That's pretty cool, because I'm looking at some over here on the corner of my desk. I was moving some stuff around, and there probably will be always a handful of hunts that kind of stick in your mind in history, where a really unique, very special deer was harvested on camera, and the content was so good and the editing was so good around it and the storyline was so good. I'll go back and visit those once in a while, but I'll be really honest with you, and I hope I don't hurt anybody's feelings, but it seems like the older you get, the less tolerance I have of hard sales and ridiculous content. It just, I'm very simple. I like to see salt of the earth people enjoying their time and having a good time. And I don't care if it's what the deer scores. Our sort of our rule of thumb at our home farm is a mature deer. And that for us could be a 4-year-old, depending on who's the hunter. Mm-hmm. It could be a 3-year-old, depending on who the hunter is. For me personally, it's a 5-year-old deer. But we don't get all caught up on inches, because we're blessed in Indiana. A good 4 or 5-year-old deer should be something that you're very proud of. And I really want to sort of lean and turn I want my grandsons and my grandkids to be proud of a 130 inch 5-year-old 8-pointer. Mm-hmm. Or whatever the upper limit of our farm that can produce. Mm-hmm. I really do fear a little bit for where the trend is heading now, that it's all about inches and the magical 200-inch mark, which is totally, I'm going to probably hurt some more feelings when I say this.
Go for it.
It's totally unrealistic for 90% of the people that consume that information. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I will tell you, having owned a farm in central Indiana in one of the best counties of our state and managing nearly 200 acres very intensively, I just killed the highest scoring deer I've ever killed in my life this past season at 174 inches. And I likely will never kill a buck bigger than that. And to me, he's a lifetime buck.
Absolutely. Stud of a buck.
Oh my gosh. And trust me, I will go to my grave being grateful for the opportunity that God gave me for this deer this year and the story that went behind it. All that to say, I do think people need to temper their expectations and be happy with realistic goals and understand you can't really fall prey to the mindset or the marketing that if you just let every year and a half, 2.5-year-old deer pass, that you're going to shoot 200-inch deer every year. It's just not realistic. It really isn't. I mean, if you were to look at the probability of that in a mathematical equation, that you'd be better off chances getting hit by lightning or winning the lottery. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer about that, but so the point being, rejoice and be happy if you kill a 140-inch deer, man. Praise God about it. If it should, whatever makes you happy and whatever the top end potential for your farm is. Obviously, guys, your farm is not going to express its potential if you're shooting 2- and 3-year-old bucks. But as a nearly a 60-year-old guy, I went through that whole curve in my life. I shot every little branch antlered buck I could shoot and was proud of them. There became a point in time when it was not as fun as it used to be anymore, and I was intrigued by something that was year wide, and that got my heart racing. And I shot a few 2-year-old deer, and that got me excited as all get out. And then finally I killed a 3-year-old buck, and that was revelation to me. I never wanted to shoot anything smaller again. And for many years, I'll say 5 to 10 years, a 3-year-old buck tripped my trigger every time I saw one. And I just didn't think it was possible to shoot anything bigger, because it was sort of like the unicorn that nobody saw. But having been blessed to own land now, and the privilege to be able to manage like we do and pass 2- and 3-year-old deer. And by the way, Just because you pass them doesn't mean you're going to see them next year. There's a whole lot of disappointment that goes along with that too, that they never come back, or somebody kills them and you never know. But one thing's for sure, they're never going to get there if you kill them. And it's so awesome for us to have a buck that we see as a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and now 5. We've got a deer, Brett, on our property he's going to be 9 this next year if he's alive.
Wow.
We've never been able to see him in a hunting scenario ever. But we see him every year all through the season, mostly at night on cameras. But the dude is an absolute ninja at survival. And we hunt smart. We hunt very, very smart. We've never seen him with our own eyes. And we call him goalposts because his brow tines sit way up on his main beams. And he's got a maybe 115-inch 7-point rack, but he's got a 300-pound field dress body. He's a giant.
Well, I remember watching one of your videos, and I think it was like a late season. No, I can't remember it. You and Zach were in a blind, and he ended up taking a buck, and you guys kind of had the same story, maybe not 9.5 years old, but like he was an older buck that you had been chasing for a while. Could never see him in daylight, and then he ended up shooting him. I can't remember if it was opening day gun or muzzle. It was one of those. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that was that. Everybody's got a buck they call Bully, and he was our buck that we called Bully because he had the attitude, he had the body, he had the disposition, and he broke a lot of racks and he ran a lot of deer off, and he was just one of those mean son of a, you know what I mean? And but his antlers too were maybe 105 or 110 inches. But he had a wedge neck and a 250, 300-pound body to push those bucks around. A lot of it is, bucks are like men. Absolutely. You could have a 6'4" teddy bear of a guy, and you could have a 5'8" scrapper dude that'll throw down with anybody. And that's it. Really is a lot of that is the intensity and the mindset of that deer and its disposition. But if he postures around and spars with enough deer, the message starts to get out. This guy's not to be fooled with. And he can come walking towards a group of bucks and they all cower down and move out of his way. And the more of that happens, the more that goes to that deer's head. And he just begins to feel like he is, invincible. And that deer was that way. He was one that we were really happy to get rid of because of the fact I do believe he was holding and keeping a lot of potentially nicer deer antler wise off of our property because he was such a mean son of a gun. But yeah, that's been a few years ago that Zach killed Bully out of the redneck in our big field. And that was a great hunt. I'm going to throw some good kudos at Zach right now because it hasn't been even produced yet. I'm still sitting on the raw footage, but the first weekend in muzzleloader season here in Indiana, Zach took a beautiful, he's a 150-inch mainframe 10-pointer and right out of the same blind, almost nearly the identical scenario. But this was a really cool buck that showed up on November the 8th in the middle of the night on one of our cameras. And that night when we saw him, we were both like, who in the world is that? Because we've never seen this deer. And he had a really unique really tall brow tine and a heck of a frame. And just the way he carried himself, he just had this look of regal authority about him. So we nicknamed him Prince, like right off the bat. He looks like a prince standing out there like, who wants to mess with me? But anyway, we didn't see him again. And he just was like one and done, one evening in a cornfield and then never saw him again. And lo and behold, he walks out into our open field the last Sunday night of gun season. And Zach's holding his bow in our redneck blind. And he's 60 yards away. And we could have easily shot him with the gun, but there he was out there, nosing around and checking our does that were out there, and melted off into the timber with some does. And it was just like, wow, that was so cool to see that he's still alive. Hopefully he'll, at this point, it's pretty certain that he's going to survive to next year. But if he happens to slip back up and shows up in muzzleloader season and he walks out in front of Zach, because I'm tagged out at this point. And wouldn't you know, he's sure in the world on the first weekend of muzzleloader, he chased, none of the does were hot, but he followed a group of 3 or 4 does out into the field and he was walking around and nosing them. And and none of them were receptive. And though so then he just started eating in our greens out there. And I got some beautiful footage of that. And Zach just put a perfect shot on him with his inline muzzleloader, and the deer went down in the field. So that's a management advantage episode that will yet to be aired, but we got some killer footage about that with that story, and just another layer of continued strings of successes that we're enjoying on our property because of the work that we're putting into it. Man, it's so fun. It's so rewarding.
Did you film prior to linking up with Management Advantage?
I did, but on a very, very minimal, non-serious level. You know, I had junk cameras, handheld stuff. Well, actually, when the filming craze first really started kicking off, I bought this. I can't even remember the model. It was a Canon camera, and it had a white body on it, and it was a giant thing.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Matter of fact, the Drury's had one, but it was a mini DV tape. It was not a digital camera, right. and we carried that for a long time. Filmed a lot of turkey hunts with it and stuff, but it wasn't until I got connected and plugged in with the Management Advantage guys, and I've been slow to come around to the technology. I still filmed with tape cameras for a long time. But, maybe 5 years or so ago, I started getting serious. I'd carry a DSLR and a good video camera and a second angle. I told you I don't get paid for what I do.
Me either.
But my compensation is I get gifted some really nice equipment once in a while. And Howard with the Management Advantage, he's the owner, along with Casey and Chuck. They sent me a DJI second angle camera this year, along with some a really good Athlon rangefinder and binoculars, so it's fun to get some little gifts in the mail once in a while when you're not expecting them. Nice. But it makes you provide better content when you have better equipment.
Absolutely.
And so between the 4K camera that I have now and that DJI second angle and the optics that I have, I feel like I'm where I need to be right now. Things are always improving though,
Absolutely. Well, let's dive into the big topic at hand. You brought it up a little bit a second ago, but Project 17, 6 years ago, or almost 7 years ago now, you started a project on a piece of property you had. Talk about Project 17 and why and how and all the questions that go with it.
Yeah, that's a great way to bring it up and segue into this. I bought our original property in 1997, and it was 58 acres, and I owned it with a good buddy of mine, a partner. And we enjoyed a lot of great hunts on there. And to me at the time, for the first 10 years, it was heaven on earth. We did a timber harvest in 2005, and in the timber, we created 3 food plot openings. We had the timber guys cut every tree that they could sell out of those 3 areas. We flagged the entire area, and we were left with a heck of a mess. But we, through burning and using a grapple bucket on a skid loader, we cleaned and gutted those openings out and ground the stumps out and burned. Anyway, we had 3 food plots that we planted, and I had a pretty good background in plant science and food plots. So understanding warm and cool season plants and perennials and different things so I had pretty good idea of what we should plant and when and how to do it, but you're just limited with a little bit of size, there. So eventually my neighbor, a scenario came up where they were potentially considering selling some of their property. And they contacted me, and this is a great spot in this conversation too. Is Brett? You'll hear it over and over again till the day you die, and I do too all the time. It must be nice to be able to own your own land, and I will tell you guys that where there is a will, there is a way. I bought that very first piece of property on a land contract with the owner, and we had a 5-year term to pay it off. We were paying cash payments every month to that guy, and we paid him off in 5 years. When I did that second level purchase of the neighbor's property, I bought my buddy out of his half of that 58 acres and banked it and got a loan on the next part. And we added 62 and a half acres at that point, and some of that was tillable. That property wrapped us on the north side and the east side, and in that off to the northeast corner, excuse me, of our original 58 acres, it drops down into a field, and there's a 17-acre tillable field that's surrounded by timber way back in the middle of nowhere, and it's beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. So I was able to add that extension on, and for the first 3 or 4 years that I owned it, I was frozen with paralysis by analysis, I guess is a good way to phrase it.
Mm-hmm.
What do I do with this? I don't want to make a mistake and regret a decision of changing anything. But at the same time, every year that passes by, I'm maybe missing out on capitalizing of what it could be. And here I was, a guy that consults for other people. I have a background in design, and I felt like I could go to somebody else's property and immediately tell you, oh man, if you did this, here's the reasons why that will benefit you. But for me on my own place, I struggled with it because I had too many potential, like scenario A, if this took this turn and this didn't work out, what if I should have done this? So again, I was really frozen by anticipation of what ifs. Finally, I put it on paper, and the idea was in the center of that 17-acre field, I put it in a hardwood tree planting. So if you look at it from the air, it looks like a Z, like a ZZ Top logo. But that center Z is in hardwood trees, and it's 3,800 oak species with some, I think there's some black gum, there's some persimmon, there's some, a bunch of chestnut in there now. But primarily it was a lot of oak species. And I chose oaks specifically because if you watch oaks in their first 20 years of life, they become a really leafy shrub of a tree until they really break out and take off. And during that first 20 or so years, depending on the soil and the productivity of where they're growing, it's the most, excuse the word, badass thicket that you can develop. And ultimately knowing that those trees will grow out of a shrub phase and become a canopy tree, but all the while knowing those trees are all going to be massed producing, dropping acorns. And eventually, at some point in time with my grandson or my great grandsons or kids, there will be some marketable timber there, that they could, use off the property. But the main idea was that center backbone is the spine of the center of that plan, is that it's going to be a leafy, brushy bedding security center section in the center of that property. Just outside of that, I have a 16-foot clover road that goes around the entire perimeter of that tree planting. This will make a lot more sense when the visual comes together for you. Outside of that, I have a north and south block of warm season grasses. There's 7 total acres of warm season grasses. 3 years after I planted the warm season grasses, I realized I got the density too thick. The pounds per acre of the grass plantings was so thick that the deer were not utilizing it to the extent that I wanted them to, that I had hoped they would. Mm-hmm. So what we did is I went in and killed circular areas connected by a hallway to another circular area connected by a hallway. So we termed, matter of fact, there's an episode on the TMA. If you guys really want to go back and watch it, you can. But we called that episode Rooms and Hallways. Basically, I killed the centers out of those grasses, leaving the marginal borders around that were extremely high and thick. You can walk around the outside of those grass plantings and not know what's going on inside there 20 feet away from you, 30 feet away from you, because it's so dense. But in those centers, I planted wildflowers and forbs in a native plant mix. So you have all the prairie clovers, you have purple coneflower, you have Illinois bundleflower, you have asters and different native plants in there that the deer and turkey will utilize as native food. But it's also very colorful. It has varying heights. There's different species that are blooming and dying off at different times of the year. And to walk in there now, you fight your way through that initial shell of the grass, and then you get into this opening, and you're like, holy crap, you can't see above the grass. You're looking in this, it really looks like a bedroom, and it's colorful. And you look over here, and there's a meandering hallway that curves, and you walk around the corner, and it opens up into another one. And it's the deer bed in there. They feed in there. They loaf in there. The turkeys feed in there. They nest in there. It's probably one of the most advantageous things I've done in the grand scheme of things is to convert some of that warm season grasses to wildflowers and native pollinators. You and I can do what I'm getting ready to say next. We can do another whole show about, but I'll make this very, very brief. Okay. I see it all the time on a lot of the chats and the Facebook pages about warm season grass plantings. Everybody wants to have a spot free, 100% pure density stand of grasses. And that is not, trust me, that is not what you want for your wildlife to really, truly, fully benefit to the fullest capacity. Even if you're talking as a bedding area, it is very possible for you to get your grasses so tight and so dense that the deer won't even like passing through them or bedding in them. Now, one of the reasons is in the past 5 or so years, there have been some greatly improved warm season grass subspecies or cultivars, and switchgrass being the primary one I'm talking about. Back in 20 years ago, a switchgrass might be this big around at the base, and it might be 6 feet tall, and it might have a crown on it like this. The new cultivars of the switchgrasses that are out there, they have a base of them like this now, and the tops are 10 feet across when they crown out, and them seed heads are on, and the arching branches of that grass gets its full size and capacity. So you start planting those things at the old density of 5 pounds, 6, 7, 8 pounds per acre. Now you have a wall that is just, it's a freaking jungle for the lack of words. There's no sun getting in there whatsoever. Grass is the only thing growing in there. And a deer does not even like fighting its way through that stuff. It's so thick. You ideally want a grass with these new varieties every 6 to 8 to 10 feet apart, so that even when their crowns are arching over, that you can still walk between plants. Now you're still completely covered and you're still getting that overhead protection and the sun and the wind, but the ground level, you can still navigate through there as a deer, as a small game, as a turkey, but also the areas that are in between those grasses, let some weeds grow in there. All weeds are not bad weeds. And when I say weeds encompasses a whole variety of plants. And you could actually consider all the wildflowers and forbs and legumes and things that are out there natively growing as weeds if you didn't know what you were looking at. So as long as it's not Canadian thistle or pigweed or water hemp, there's several plants in that species. Palmer amaranth is another nasty one. Even people get really bent out of shape about mare's tail, not ragweed, but the straight up mare's tail. Who cares if you got a few of those out there? Just don't let it be some of the things, the noxious weeds, the invasive species weeds that will wreck your property. And Canadian thistle in Indiana is one of the worst ones. I'll promise you that, because once you have it, it's a pain in the butt to get rid of. But anyway, back to the original point. Let some diversity grow in between those big, tall formations of grass, and don't be so hung up on having a spot free like your lawn. Kentucky blue, perennial rye, and annual perennial fescue out here in my yard. If I see a dandelion out there, I'm going to, turn inside out and have to run out there and pluck it out of the ground. We cannot have that mentality about our wildlife habitat. It's all things native are not bad. Weeds are not always a bad thing. So I know I'm beating the drum there, but
so when you were laying this out, you were even thinking of stages of 5, 10, 15, 20 years past that is what I gathered from that when you were saying it would go from a bedding to a fruit producing tree. Like it sounds like it. How long did it take you to lay this whole thing out?
I laid it out. I mean, I could have sat down and laid it out in 15 minutes, but it took me a year or two of, well, I don't like this. I did revisions about it. And so if anybody is really, truly interested in it, go to the Management Advantage and just start at the very beginning. Look at Project 17. You will see we're sitting there in the field holding this original drawing that's colored, and you can see the outline. And we went out there in the field and stuck in flagging, and we started planting trees. We started running the Ferminator through there. We took the no-till drill and planted the warm season grasses. And in all the corners of that field, I maintained food plots. So I didn't convert it all just to native type of habitat. I still have corn and bean plantings, and I have a couple spots in there that we plant fall annuals in every year. And I also overlap fall annuals into my corn and bean stand. We'll broadcast those just to make sure we have another layer of food. But I told you that the warm season grasses were outside of the hardwood tree planting. And then on the outside of the warm season grass planting, we have another clover road that goes around the entire property and then it joins the timber. So we can burn the grasses with a fire break. The clover also acts as a fire break, but it also is a tremendous amount of food. We've got 3.5 acres of clover around the entire field, so just in roads. But also the third benefit of that, because the grasses are 8 feet tall when they're at their full maturity, depending on the wind direction, we can park an electric buggy or an ATV or whatever and walk in one of those roads on the way to one of the various stands in that part of the farm, and nobody ever knows we're there because we're walking on a green, quiet path with the wind in our favor and heading to a certain direction, and nothing can see you unless it's standing right in front of you on the road. We walk by deer all the time, in and out there, and it's really changed the way we hunt the farm. It's changed the outcomes of our hunts. The success rates have skyrocketed, but it's also a very good feeling just to see the wildlife enjoying and benefiting from that 17 acres of conversion. It's really, really awesome. I'd encourage anybody that hasn't watched the series yet to go back from one. And you'll see some hiccups that we've had along the way. There were some things that we didn't plan on. I had a horrible invasion of sycamore trees that came into our tree planting that just seeded out of the air. And and sycamores, by the way, if you've never dealt with them, they'll grow 10 feet in a year. And I'm not exaggerating. They can really overtake an area in no time at all. So we've had to do some occasional control of going in and specifically spot spraying some unwanted trees and things like that. But it's been a blast. It's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. And a lot of guys asked me way back when about the trees. If I had to do it all over again, that first year we planted clover and chicory lanes between all those hardwood tree plantings. And I didn't invest the $5,000 or $10,000, whatever it would have cost me at the time to put tree shelters and tubes and stakes on all of those brand new trees. And my experiment was, can we overwhelm the deer with so much food everywhere between all of our plots and corn and beans and clover and everything that we had, that they wouldn't demolish the trees? The answer is no, you can't.
I bet.
The energy that they receive out of nipping the buds off of those hardwood trees is unmatched in the food plot. So they recognize that, and every chance they get, they will nip the top out of a tree as it's growing. What we did, probably, it took me a couple of years to really turn it around and figure it out, but I quit mowing those roads between the trees, and we just let it grow up in weeds and brush.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started implementing tree shelters that were given to me from a couple buddies that had these giant jobs, and they were giving me, 200 at a time. And we were going in where we could and recognizing oaks that were being clipped pretty hard, and we sheltered them with tree tubes. But now we have trees in there that are way over my head, oaks that are finally pushing up out of that brushy stage. And by the way, the weeds will protect those trees. The deer sort of lose them in that mix of just, and as long as it doesn't turn into young timber, maybe mow it every few years, and we're mowing maybe every other row every few years, so we don't have it wide open for the deer to just have full access to all those saplings when they're walking down through there. But anyway, that was one of the big learning points for me, was making sure that I learned that I can't overwhelm the deer with enough food that they're not going to eat the trees. You got to take some preventative measures there. I know I'm rambling, man, so stop me if you want to.
You're fine. This is awesome. I'm loving it. What's one of the biggest changes that you've seen in Project 17, and since you've started, maybe something that you switched along the way, or something didn't go your way, or something like that? What's something that didn't go, or what's a big change that you didn't see coming, or something like that?
Yeah, I would say for us, the big one I talked about a minute ago was having less warm season grasses, and having more, I would call it a pollinator wildflower field, native legumes and wildflowers. That was a big one for me, that I learned the importance of not having your grasses planted too densely. By the way, probably raise some eyebrows here, 3 to 4 pounds per acre, to me, depending on the variety of seeds that you're planting, is ideal for warm season grasses, with a composition of native and biennial perennial weeds coexisting together. So ideally, you can plant some forbs and wildflowers with your warm season grasses to have a native prairie habitat, which would be the best of both worlds and have it a home run. But if you're planting just warm season grasses, 4 to 5 pounds an acre max, and just be careful and spot check for the noxious weeds, like I said, Canadian thistle. Some of that other stuff, let it be. Just let it be. Another thing is, we have now attracted and are holding a lot, and I mean a lot, more deer. And we struggle. We start out every year saying we're going to kill 6 does, we're going to kill 8 does, we're going to kill 10 does. And I'm ashamed to say it again, this year we've killed 3. So it always seems like you never hit the goal. Well, at least we don't, and we hunt hard, because it's always like, well, Sunday night, that's the last thing in the world you want to do, is deal with,
right.
You got to get home, dinner's on the table an hour and a half away, and your wife's expecting you home. I'm making up some excuses here, but yeah, being determined and being able to understand, when you create the environment for better deer, you are attracting and holding more deer. So then, as a responsible landowner and a manager, it's very quick to you can very quickly have the opposite problem of having too many mouths feeding on your food plots, and degradation, I should say, of the quality of your food overall over the entire property. And the more social stress you bring in with more deer per square mile or per acre, bucks don't like an extreme amount of social stress. They'll leave and relinquish some of the better areas to the does that are raising fawns. So you have to be ready to pull the trigger and to do it efficiently and effectively, and be able to manage your doe population. And so then there's the struggle of, you don't really like hunting hard in the first part of October because it's really hot and you don't want to blow up your best spots, and you want to save them for later in the month when the cold fronts start moving in and you start having better opportunity. You got to hunt some of your fringe areas and kill does. You just have to do it and get the job done. And it always seems like now that the Halloween's here, we still haven't killed nearly as many. So we're going to try to. Well, nobody wants to shoot a doe when you're expecting a buck to walk right around the corner. That's another problem. So unless you are in the spot where maybe you're getting ready to get down for the morning, or it's like 5 minutes before legal and you can shoot a doe here or there, do that when you can to hit those quotas. Again, all things being equal, there's a whole lot of stuff out there right now that are affecting deer populations, EHD, some other bad things that I don't even want to get into the conversation right now. But Indiana has been through some very severe cycles of EHD in the past 10, 12, 15 years. Luckily for us in West Central Indiana, our area was virtually untouched this year. But man, Franklin County, Fayette County, Union County, southeastern Ohio got devastated this year. So just because you have a doe quota of 8 does this year doesn't mean you have a doe quota of 8 does next year. You have to be a intensive manager paying attention to what's going on. That's through direct observation, through cameras, through censuses. There's really, it's pretty scientific. And we've got a couple of videos out there about how to do a fully blown 14-day true biological deer analysis survey by running certain number of cameras over certain corn piles through late July and August, and then extrapolating the numbers that you get to determine buck to doe ratios, deer per square mile, identifying unique bucks. And that can be a little geeky for those of you guys that aren't into it that deep, but that is really a real true way to understand. With the technology that we have nowadays, drones are incredibly beneficial, but they can also be greatly abused and used for the wrong purposes. And there's a whole lot of that's yet to, I believe we're going to see some major rules and regulations and laws being put in place for drones in the next 5 to 10 years, just because the ripe and atmosphere for abuse of that. It's an incredibly great tool, but it can be abused. But anyway, back to, as I said, I jump around a lot. So
no, you're fine, buddy. You're fine.
The need to make sure you're taking your does, but also being a smart person to understand the ebbs and flows of your population. And it's, again, there's no cookie cutter 10 deer per year. It may be no does this year. It may be 5 next year. It may be 15 the year after. But that comes with time and being very in tune with your property. You can see it in your food plots, the amount of food plot usage. Those exclusion cages are really truly something that works. A lot of guys think, that seems like a silly waste of time. But there's a lot of people that say, man, I don't know what happened. My food plot, I did everything right. It never grew. It just never did anything. You put a cage around a 10-foot circle, and now you got knee-high clover and whatever in that food plot, and everything else around it is dirt. There you go. It's not you. You did nothing wrong. You did everything exactly right. But a deer doesn't stand in one spot and eat all day long. It moves about. So you put 10 does or 10 deer in a field at night, and they're constantly moving like that robot vacuum cleaner that you put on your kitchen floor. Yeah. It covers every square foot of that field, So you can't judge by just you walking up to a field every weekend and going, what happened? I don't understand. Gosh darn. You asked me, the original question was some of the things I've learned. Backing up, the warm season grasses, making sure that you do your doe harvesting. With that being said, Zach and I have come to terms that we're actually going to take a couple more acres back out of warm season grasses and put it into corn and beans this year. So then in the Project 17 field, we'll have 2, 4, 5, 5.5 out of the 17 acres is going to be in food. Not counting the clover buffers. I'm talking annual plantings of corn and beans and fall annuals that we plant every year, just because we're not getting it done. We're not killing enough does every year. And I recognize that rather than continue to beat ourselves over the head a little bit, I'm just gonna add a couple acres more food every year is going to give us a little bit more leverage there. One of the biggest, hugest advantages or benefits that we did was a very intensive timber harvest too on our hardwoods. We cut a lot. We cut 985 trees off of nearly 160 acres of timber, and sounds like a lot, and it is. But you go through our woods now, and there's still gobs and gobs of trees, 14, 16 inches. We didn't cut down to the 12 inches. We cut a reasonable harvest size, but now you can't see 50 yards into the timber because now it's briars. And I say briars, I don't mean multiflora rose. I mean the good stuff, greens, young saplings, all those early pioneering plants that come out a couple years after harvest. And we have deer bedding everywhere and eating everything on the ground in the timber. So now we don't rely just on food that we plant. We're relying on Mother Nature and the regeneration in the timber to feed a lot of our deer too. And without that, I would be in trouble. I wouldn't be able to grow a food plot right now.
What about other food sources in the area? Is there a bunch of ag near this, or is this like, back when it was ag before you had Project 17, was it a big major food source for them?
Yeah, it was. Luckily for us, though, even though what I would consider comparatively to like East Central Indiana, our farm is big timber. Mm-hmm. We're connected to hundreds of acres of timber with the occasional opening in it. But if you go either direction a half a mile, north or south, you're into some upland ag fields or some bottomland ag fields.
Okay.
So the deer just have to walk a half a mile or less either direction. And that sounds like a lot, but for a deer, it's not. And they're in the evenings, they're in corn and bean fields. So we're trying to mimic that as best we can to have standing corn and beans for our deer. So hopefully they don't have to wander off and cross the roads and get out, but they do. They always do. They can have the most food in the world, and you'll still see them out there along the highway eating, and you're thinking, what are you doing? What are you doing out there?
I had a whole thing written down on actual hunting these properties, but I think I'm going to get you back on and do like a part 2 of this on hunting side of things. But before we go, I want to hear the hunt of Blur and how all that occurred this fall.
Yeah, thank you. That again, it's the hunt of my career, my life. It was a night that everything just perfectly aligned, and it was as if it was meant to be. It was like God's finally rewarded me for, hey Tom, I've seen you do all that you've been doing for these animals, and here's a low hanging softball for you. No, it wasn't quite that bad, but Blur appeared on our farm 3 years ago as a 2-year-old, beautiful frame 10-pointer, and I mentioned this in the hunt video that, and we are running, mostly still are. We're also adding a few different brands, but maybe 10 or 15 Reveal Tacticams, and so we're getting phone, the images sent to the phone. Mm-hmm. But this 10-pointer, he came in our property the first week of November, and every food plot that we have, every scrape that was on the edge of one of our food plots that we had moved cameras to, this beautiful 2-year-old was by him. And the frustrating thing, though, was every time we got his picture, he was moving by really fast. Even in the scrapes, if he would stop at a scrape, he was moving his head around real fast. And so all you would see were these distorted tines and blurry images. So after about 25 or 30 pictures of this blurry freaking 10-pointer, we decided to call him the 10-point Blur, so it just sort of stuck. One thing about us naming our deer too, we don't have some system or, this list of names. It's almost like it just pops in your head. Yeah. Well, that's the sassafras buck or whatever. I mean, it's just,
right.
It's just the first thing that kind of jumps in your head. So Blur, the name stuck just because of his predisposition to have his picture not taken. Obviously, we knew he was a very young deer, but that first year we never saw him. It was just always at night on camera. But it was cool to see him come in there as a 2-year-old deer. And then the following year, which would be 23, he was 3 years old. Same thing. We didn't really have him on camera at all during the summer, but the first week of November, there he was again, moving through the food plots, bumping does around, bigger 10-point frame, gorgeous deer. I personally wouldn't have shot him that year just because, again, my personal goal is to get him to be at least 5 years or 4 to 5 years old. And I drop my guard a little bit depending on the deer that it is, but excuse me. We again did not see him as in a hunting scenario. And then we found a shed of his the following spring in our big food plot cove field in the 17 project field, right before we did the matter of fact, we were driving around with my buddies from the timber crew, and we were talking about where they were going to stage, where they were going to haul logs out. We were just going over the entire farm. We rode by the field, and Zach saw the shed laying out there. And he picked him up, and it was just, there he was, Blur's side. The following year, 2024, as a 4-year-old, now he got my attention. As a 4-year-old deer, he put on some additional, I would say he was probably a 155, 160 10-pointer. And both of my sons-in-laws are named Zach. Zach York, who you're familiar with.
Yes, sir.
And Zach Veter, who spells his name with a CH. So Zach also loves to hunt. He's not quite as dedicated to coming out as often as Zach York does with me. But when he does come, we always have a great time. Anyway, there was a long weekend of archery season when both Zachs were in camp and I was hunting by myself, and Zach York was sitting with Zach Veter and filming his hunts. Mm-hmm. They had a cat and mouse, 2 or 3 different hunts on the big ridge in the center of our farm with Blur with a hot doe. And they had him at 60 to 70 to 80 yards multiple times over a 2 or 3 hunt period, but just never could get him to close the distance. But they got, enough, phone videos of him and pictures that they were really excited about what kind of a deer he was. And I myself, a couple of weeks later, had a, I won't say a close call, but I saw him moving through the timber on the other side of the field. And as he was disappearing, I rattled at him and I grunted, and I stood up and was standing there ready for the next hour, just dialed, ready for him to show up.
Yeah. He
didn't. I climbed down. At noon, I walked out. I pulled a card off the golf cart. We have an electric hunt via a golf cart, 4-wheel drive deal. I drove over the hill. I pulled the card off the cart so I didn't have to walk around, and I left. And lo and behold, there he is. He had responded to my rattling, and he was over the hill behind me at 40 yards, right in front of that camera.
Oh, wow.
Staring, looking for the source of the rattling. I never saw him, but it just added to the story. So going in, that was it. No more sightings of Blur. In the 2025 season, we were getting his pictures at the very north end of our property a few times in the summer, and he put on a lot of size. He was giant. And got I don't know, maybe a half dozen pictures of him up there, and he was like just on the fringe of our property and not down in on any of the other cameras. The Friday night of Halloween, we drove out, and I hunted a spot in the middle of our timber with the right wind. We had a north wind cold front come through, and I didn't see anything, didn't see a buck that night. Zach was hunting a different stand, and when he was leaving, he pulled the card. It wasn't a cell cam camera, but he pulled the card, and we went back to camp that night, and there is freaking Blur in the middle of our property for the first time of the season, and he was on 2 cameras that weekend. That was Friday night and Saturday morning, and we found this out like Saturday night, and so Sunday evening, the wind switched around from the southwest and it got a little bit warm, but that we thought there was a possibility that he was in our northernmost draw, because that's where both of those pictures were taken, on a food plot on the edge of it and down in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I went around to the very north end of the north side of that draw, where a little ridge comes up out of there, and it kind of connects to, it's hard to explain, but a really subtle terrain feature kind of pinches them together right there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a little bottleneck. You wouldn't even realize it unless you sat and watched the deer use it. But anyway, I sat in that little stand, and Zach sat in what we call the Sassafras Cove, which was where we got his picture the night before in the standing corn. And I got in the tree. It was loud, crunchy, dry leaves. I was just uptight and nervous because I was making so much noise walking in. And I'll wrap this up quickly. But I got in the tree, and I swore that I heard a snort wheeze down in the draw down below me. And then I thought I heard leaves crunching. But when I was using my binoculars and staring down in there, all I could see were squirrels threading around on the hillside. And I thought, nah, man, you're just imagining things. And then a little bit later, I saw a really cool looking 3-year-old 8-pointer come walking up out of there, and he was walking away from me. And I thought, okay, I did hear a deer down there. That's pretty cool. Then again, I swore I heard the snort wheeze, and really had my attention now. I'm just staring down. By the way, all that timber cutting we did, that hillside rolling down into that draw is just thick and nasty. You can see the tops laying out there, and you can see 6 and 8 foot tall brush and saplings and stuff growing up. So it's just really, really thick down in there. And the next deer that came up out of there was a beautiful 4-year-old 8-pointer that most guys would have shot.
Mm-hmm.
And he came walking up out of there and started working a scrape right here in front of me. And then he came over here and was rubbing a tree so aggressively that the top was almost brushing my tree. And it was, I was just enjoying this, watching this really pretty buck putting on the show. And I happened to look back up and over, and coming up out of that same draw, but he was coming up all the way at the very head of that draw, right where it connects to the logging road that wraps around it.
Mm-hmm.
I see a rack in there floating around, and I pull my camera over and I zoom in, and it's Blur. He's standing there and he's eating leaves off of a raspberry bush. And he took forever to come up out on the log road. And he came and he started walking my way, coming down the road. And the road ends up coming by me at 30 yards to my right. But there's also a heck of a deer trail that's down on the ridge in front of me, that's on that drops down into that bottom right there at 30 yards in front of me. So he's right there at the point where he's going to decide to turn and cut in on the ridge, or he's going to walk on the road. And this buck got behind me, and I think he saw me move the camera arm, because he bounced off. And when he did, Blur looks up and he's staring like, what's up? What's going on? And I kid you not, Casey did a wonderful job of editing all this out of it, but there was a 14-minute long standoff of him staring and not moving, just looking back and forth and staring. And I thought it was over. I thought this deer was going to blow and it was all going to be over. Eventually, finally, I think it was an act of God. That deer didn't blow at me, didn't run. But Blur flicked his tail and kept on walking. And then he starts cutting down on the ridge out in front of me. And gosh, I was so in tune with keeping the camera on him. He starts to come into it. And for some reason in my mind, I think I need to get him over here. But my common sense kicked in at that point. I'm like,
I need my bow.
You better shoot this dang deer right now. And I did. I reached down, and he was just getting ready he stopped at a little beech tree and was like working the overhead branch. And he even rubbed his hocks together, and he snort wheezed again right there. And I drew when he went behind a tree. And actually he took a step when I released my arrow, but it hit about that far back from where I was aiming, but it still, he went 60 yards and stopped and got woozy and went over and laid down. Then he fell over. But what went through my mind of all the times that I own this farm, the years and years and years of hard work, the hunts that never worked out, you know, that you always hope and something's going to happen. And it almost seemed like that night was too easy. Like it was just, I shouldn't say it that way, but it just clicked. Everything was just perfect. Here's a 5-year-old deer walking by at, 45 minutes before dark, at 30 yards broadside, doesn't even know I'm in the world. And I shot him, and there he's laying. It was just one of those surreal experiences. And
it's an incredible video.
Have you seen it?
I've watched it. Yeah, I actually watched it a couple times. It's an incredible video, and it's so nice, like you said, for it to come into play like that and everything work out. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't chasing.
No.
He wasn't worried about going anywhere quickly.
He wasn't.
Gave you time to you put the camera on him, get beautiful footage, and then it seemed like, in my mind, when he was behind the tree and you finally draw back, it seemed like an eternity before you get able to actually click one off at him.
He stepped out of there, and at 30 yards, and I shoot a pretty fast Matthews bow, and you saw my lighted knock, but he responded to the sound and even started to duck, and he took the step forward. So my arrow hit, let's say, that much high and that much to the right of where I was aiming, but it still was enough I caught the back of his lungs, and he didn't go very far. But that whole thought of, okay, you got him in the frame, get your dang bow drawn back and shoot this deer, because my first priority in my head has always been capturing the video. If you've ever self-filmed, I'm sure you have, Brett.
Absolutely.
It really does stink.
It's a very daunting task.
It's horrible.
I shot one this year in Missouri. Ended up shooting high. Didn't find the deer, but I actually had kind of the same thing happen. I had the deer at 38 yards, and I'm looking, and I'm like, because I had ranged another deer that went in that hole, and I thought, well, if he comes into that spot, I know it's 38 yards. He stepped into that spot, and I went to draw, and I went, oh shit, the camera is still over here. So I drew it over, and he walked out a few steps and actually put a tree in between us, because I was in a saddle. So I kind of had to lean back. And when I drew, I bumped the camera.
Yes.
At that point, I'm like, I'm just going to shoot this deer. I'm in another state, But what happened when I bumped it to the left, and he walked right into the view. I couldn't even ask for it any better, really.
That's awesome.
Well, finding them, that would have been a better spot. I hit him too high and just kind of hit that no man's land where I didn't hit any vitals. And talk about a heartbreak for sure for my 25 season.
Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that, because it happens to everybody.
For sure.
I think you just summarized it very well, that usually when you're in a scenario where there's a big buck coming, you've got split seconds to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like you're always rushing and hurrying, especially in the rut, if they're moving fast or chasing a doe or whatever. But this night, because that other 4-year-old was right here, Blur, there was already that sense of territorialism or showing out for him. And I mean, for him to snort wheeze while he's walking down in front of me, because he could hear him up here walking in the leaves, he knew he still had these other bucks around. So he was making sure to assert his dominance even there, and ultimately he's headed down this ridge to drop down into this big draw and head up the other side and go into the corn and the 17 acres where all our food and all our warm season grass. So he was headed that way, and he was just bedded on one of these fringe fingers, these little draw fingers that comes up out of the main draw. And I attribute the fact that he was in there to the regeneration of the timber harvest. It was super thick and gnarly. He felt very comfortable being down in there. And for those deer to be up daylight walking like they were, even that 4-year-old up here scraping and rubbing trees and acting like there was nobody's care in the world. Low pressure attitude, very, very smart, hunting it with the right wind, not overly hunting some of our interior stands, not fudging the wind. Lots of things that go into that. But again, I just think I hit the lottery that night. That's, you can hunt 100 times and not have that happen.
Talk about how cool is it though when you hear him snort wheeze. It always makes the hair on the back of the neck
for sure.
stand up. You're like, oh man, here we go.
Well, you know what else it did to me is when I saw him do it with my own eyes, like, yeah, man, I was hearing that whole time. He was snort wheezing at that first buck that came up out of there, and he was also snort wheezing at this 4-year-old 8-pointer.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have been really cool to see what was going on down in that draw, in that little short spans of time. There's maybe 50 yards down in there that they were working, and it's a deep V draw. There's not a big bottom in there. It's just a pretty narrow bottom. So they were probably in there. I won't say they were butting heads, but they were posturing up around each other, but they were just waiting for that sun to get a little bit lower and a little bit lower to come on up out there and do their thing.
That's awesome, man.
It was cool. I green scored him at 174 in 1 or 2 eighths. That was a quick score job.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless of what he scores, he's my best deer ever, and probably likely will be the best deer I ever kill.
And it's even more rewarding when you go get him, and you get to see the little guys the next morning come and take pictures with you and spend time with your family. It's pretty cool, man. It was pretty cool part of the video. I liked it.
That to me is so important. Where we kind of get caught up in doing it for ourselves and doing it and to kill the deer. It's all our reward, but to be able to share it with your family. Zach was with me that night, and his little boy, Bo, and my daughter, Morgan, and my wife came out, and Bo was all about wanting to see that deer. When he's 12, 14, 16, 18 years old, he can go back and watch that video when he came out and saw Pappy's deer, and I hope, and I'm not going to force him by any means, but I hope that I'll be able to pass on that love for bow hunting that his dad has with me now. And then I hope he picks it up and he enjoys managing the farm and working with this and enjoying the fruits of the rewards of our labor when he's a young man too. And I really look forward to that.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the coolest things about having the YouTube and channel and that kind of brand setup is later on they can go back and watch it. I would love for my son's seen a lot of it, but when he gets a little bit older, maybe if I'm not around anymore, here's a video of my dad pounding turkeys back when he was in his 30s, or whatever. It's just kind of cool to have something like that to go back.
It is, and it's in the digital world, it's going to be there, as they say, forever. It's not going away. So our generations ahead of us will be able to go back and watch, and that. There's something about that too that also innately drives me to continue to carry the camera. Of all the times we set up the arms and get everything set up and nothing ever happens and tear it down. Right. It's the 1 out of 50 that you get some killer video, and it makes that all those other times that you packed it, that nothing happened, worthwhile.
It seems like for me, it's like the one time that I don't expect something to happen is when it happens for me.
Right.
I could be on edge. It's November the 7th, and I think it's all going down, in the morning hunt or something. I'm, on pins and needles in the tree before the sun even comes up. I got every which, I got my GoPro up top. I got my big camera going, and then I don't see shit. And then, December 1st, and I'm like sitting there and I'm like, man, I'm probably not going to see anything today. And I see 4 deer over 130 inches. It's just the craziest thing when it comes to toting the camera.
Well, that goes to show you too, that if it ever gnaws at you and you think, you know what, I'm probably not going to see something tonight, I'm just going to leave that crap at home. That'll be the night that something spectacular happens, and you are kicking yourself in the butt for not taking it with you.
It's happened on that deer right there.
Yeah.
2023. I didn't take the camera that day, and I shot that deer.
That should haunt you, and it makes
for sure it does.
When you're sitting there looking at your pack and going, "Do I really want to pack that in tonight?" That deer right there behind you will say, "Yep, you better."
Absolutely. Well, Tom, it's been a great conversation. We got to set it up for another night, do a part 2. I want to really dive in and ask you your approach on these properties as far as stand locations, camera setups, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
We'll definitely need to do a part 2.
Yeah. And as I said, man, when we first started this, if you can't tell, I breathe, live, eat, and sleep this stuff, and I can get really excited about it, and I can go down a rabbit trail. But it's because I feel like there's some things that I have learned the hard way that are worth mentioning. And if I can keep somebody else from making the same mistake or grabbing a tip that I learned through trial and error, it's worth mentioning. It's worth bringing out. So I think there's a lot of those chapters in my story that I'll have of like, hey guys, while we're talking about this, remember, don't do this because I did, no, I love talking about it. And you bet. I mean, the hunting strategy and the side of things is a whole nother aspect and a layer. A lot of it is directly related to the way that we set the land up. But it sure is true about it. Once the land is set up, we set all the different stand locations up based on no known historical deer movement patterns, but also for variable winds and access, getting in and getting out. And so those are whole other conversations that we can have. And
absolutely,
it's very important stuff. Yeah.
For sure. Well, before we log off here, tell everybody where they can find you, Management Advantage, and follow your story.
Yeah, I'd love for you guys, if you haven't seen any of that stuff, and by the way, I go back 20 years, so there's some really cool old hunts in there too. But if you're really interested in the Project 17 stuff that we started 6 years ago, it's themanagementadvantage.com. And you can find it on a website, or you can go to YouTube and look it up there. It's also people will sometimes just look management advantage. It's the management advantage. So if you hear people say TMA, that's short for the management advantage. So TMA, but also me personally, if you want to drop me an email or something, it's pretty simple. It's tom.james@sullivanauctioneers.com. And I have a Facebook page. I've got a personal page, and I have an Instagram page too. So you can kind of track. I'm not a real big chest thumper that likes to throw a lot of my own pictures and content out there. I kind of let whoever we work with put it out for us. And but sometimes it's you can't help but want to share it, especially if it's got your family involved. And Zach York, my son-in-law, he works with me too at Sullivan.
Well, maybe we get him on here with you for part 2.
I was kind of hoping he could jump on with us tonight. You get us both at the same time, and you probably never get us to shut up because
that's okay too.
Then we'll be talking about personal interactions on the farm and these different hunting layups or layouts and strategies that we've experienced together. But Zach York is also on Instagram and Facebook, so he posts a lot of our successes and his successes on our farm too. By the way, that deer that he shot in muzzleloader season, he's posted some pictures of that recently. That hunt, I'm going to give all the content to Casey, and he usually turns around the episodes in a week or two after he receives the content from us. So that muzzleloader hunt will still air on TMA as well.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate everybody listening to podcast land. If you're watching us on YouTube, appreciate that. But we'll be back here again next week, and we'll see you then.
Thanks, Brett.